morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson. Sheely, good morning. Can you believe we are like a week, not even a week, like 6 days away from Christmas? What a year 2020 has been. Whew, I think I'm over it. I'm ready for 2021. Whatever it may bring, I'll take it. Enough of 2020. We're going to have a real interesting broadcast this morning. Let me see where my trusty co-hosts are. There's David. Good morning.
Good morning, Tamara.
Hey, David, I think I like you in black.
Uh-huh.
Kind of does it for you, David. It's nice on you.
Yeah, doesn't make me look as washed out.
Oh,
Hey.
there's Robbie with her Pocahontas braid. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you, Miss Beauty and Barber.
It's cute, girl. It's cute.
Gracias.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, y'all. I'm over 2020. This year has been enough. We have runoffs here in Georgia. I've been, been attacked from every angle. Woo-wee. The COVID, the school closings. I think everybody's over it. I think we're all over 2020.
Tamara, do you want to elaborate? Because I want to discuss something and I want you to explain. I know people know, obviously people are watching, so they follow you. But what are you getting attacked for? What exactly are people saying?
Look at Robbie, the roving reporter. Let's drive in, Robbie.
Well, I think go ahead.
Because I'm talking about withholding the vote. I'm telling people, and withhold the vote is something that, this is not new. For those of you that are new to me, this is not new. Withhold the vote was something that from my state Senate race back in 2018, when Sally Harrell literally, felt like that race was hers, and she used her white privilege and, never had an agenda for her Black constituency, just showed up and was able to defeat me in a primary where it was, the white voters in my district, some of them that are truly my friends, were gracious enough to say, Tamara, we're hearing what white people are saying, and they're not going to vote for you, a Black girl, over this white lady. So
how has Ms. Harris performed?
I have yet to follow her. She's been, from what I can tell, relatively quiet. Maybe somebody else has some information, but I just, I went to law school in 2018 after that, because I knew I needed some new tools in my tool belt.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking, and David, feel free to chime in here at any point. When you're telling people, your experience, what literally you experience with the Democratic Party, after putting in time and effort, them cherry picking a candidate that virtually no one is really hearing about right now. And so now you're seeing again, and everyone's admitting it, everyone who's coming on the show from both parties are advising that DC has come in and cherry picked again candidates that really, we're unsure about. And when we say DC and the Democrats, I think we have a reason to be concerned, because the Democrats here, at least where I live in Atlanta, have been highly problematic. Under Reed, under Mayor Bottoms, my at-large are Democrats, Matt Westmoreland at City Council, Andre Dickens, Democrats. And what we have seen is an exodus of legacy residents. And what I have witnessed is really a war on legacy residents that starts at the basic level. I drove the other day around Ebenezer Baptist Church, and I saw literally what people would call encampments of homeless. So when you're telling people to withhold the vote for a strategy, for leverage, what is your goal? Is it to aid? What is it your goal? That's what I'm trying to understand. Your goal is what? And people are mad about this goal. So exactly what is your goal? Let's dissect it to a degree.
Yes.
I'm going somewhere with this.
Yeah, I know you are. I know you are, Robbie. So yeah, accountability. We have to hold our elected officials and our candidates accountable. And there's no accountability, going to the polls and just voting blue, no matter who, doesn't make any sense to me. You don't know, you want to know where your candidates and your elected officials stand on the issues. You don't just give that vote away for free. So because I am asking and I'm encouraging voters to hold their candidates and elected officials accountable, people are like scared and mad.
I think what may be happening to some people, which is why I'm so glad that you allow, your show and you're so transparent, is, for example, the defund the police. People hear a portion and don't hear the rest. Mm-hmm. They don't hear defund the police and reallocate those funds into more productive services instead of militarizing when there's non-violent crimes that we don't need to lock people up, when we taxpayers will now pay 5 times the amount for operating this way. When you're saying withhold the vote, there's actually a second and third component. Withhold the vote in a strategic fashion, in a time frame that matters, so that you can ensure that your needs are met.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's leverage and that's power. And the two things that people have is as power is the money in your pocket. You spend that wisely, and that vote. So you have to be mindful of who you give that vote to. And I have a problem with Raphael Warnock standing in the pulpit of Dr. King on the legacy of this leadership, the legacy of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and not have an agenda specific to Black people, and not have a plan for reparations. I have a problem with that. And if people are saying, well, maybe when he gets to Washington, he might do something. So we're going to vote somebody in because they might. Mm-hmm. No, we can't. When he gets there, we can't hold him accountable to something he never said he would do.
So in essence, if today Raphael Warnock's camp updated his website and maybe included the word Black, which, by the way, the word Black is not on his website. I read the whole website. I screenshotted it too, in case someone came back to talk to me about this. That being said, if he modified his website to include the word Black, to include reparations with a timeline, to maybe, I would love to see Raphael, and really the Democratic Party, I think it's a better strategy, good morning, reach out to every single one of the other Democrats and independents that received votes like you, significant votes. We had Deborah Jackson here, 300,000 votes. You had over 100,000. So there alone, we would have a higher percentage, and each of you were bringing something to the table of value that he could create a commission on. Now, we have to wonder why that's not happening. But if he did that in this time frame before January 5th, is it logical that you would change your position and say,
absolutely,
what?
Absolutely.
So you're not just saying withhold the vote without some type of strategy.
Absolutely. He would have my support. He would have support from other candidates. Like you said, there's independents that are floating around that have been on this broadcast that have talked to us. The Democratic Party has not reached out to them. Why not? I haven't been contacted. When we had Deborah Jackson on, she hadn't been contacted. Why not bring us all in? That's because these two candidates have been picked, and we're being controlled by a whole nother level of politics. And until we, the people, those of us, the rest of us, until we organize, galvanize, mobilize, and come together, we can't beat this. The money won in this race. It wasn't that Raphael or Kelly were better candidates, because I can tell you there was a lot of us on that ballot that were just as qualified or capable as either of them. The two of them had a whole lot. They have a whole lot of damn money behind them. So they were able to get messaging out in places that most of us weren't.
Mm-hmm. So ironically, who really has a massive amount of authority and opportunity here? Raphael Warnock, because he actually could do this. He could gain the votes that you had. He could gain the votes. I'm sorry, I missed the comment.
Ice Cube, this Waukesha said, Ice Cube said it, where's the Black agenda? And let's go to David a little bit here. David, I know you are stuck somewhere on the fence. Well, you're probably not on the fence. You want to tell us where you are, David?
Well, I guess I'm still stuck. I mean, my feeling is that I don't know. I'm focused on the national agenda. I don't think it's going to be necessarily. I think it will be a whole lot worse if there isn't this slim Democratic majority. If things don't get done, under the Biden administration, this a 48 to 50 Senate is going to be the perfect excuse for for the centrist Democrats to abandon the program, and whether they can do anything with a 50-50 Senate, aside from the fact that all of the ranking members become chairs of committees, which is powerful in itself. I mean, you set the agenda for these powerful committees. There's a lot that can happen or can't happen. So there's a.
Uh-oh, did he freeze? He froze. Yikes. David is frozen.
I actually agree with David, and that's all the more reason for Raphael Warnock to be calling Deborah Jackson, to be calling you, for the Democrats to be telling Raphael Warnock to do so, to gain those votes, and so we could have some type of inclusive agenda. David, you're back. You froze.
You're back. You were frozen.
Yeah, all of you were frozen. I didn't hear anything from when I said.
Robbie says she actually agrees with some of you, most of what you're saying, because she understands that if Warnock would do these things, things would work for all of us. But things are going to not work for all of us, David. Things are going to work for you.
I agree with David in that that's all the more reason for the Warnock campaign and the Democrats to be contacting the other people that ran to get all those votes together to execute a real strategy. But the question then comes up, David, you have to ask yourself, because action speaks louder than words, why are they not doing that? So in essence, I mean, I have a theory on it, but what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'd like to hear what your theory is. I think that one piece of it is I think that the Democratic Party has become a party of the upper middle class, and including the people of color, African American upper middle class, and they really don't give a crap about poor people, except to the extent that they can they could bring out bring them out as voters. So I'm really concerned about that the Republican Party is becoming the party of the white working class. Not that they represent their interests, but they have thoroughly convinced that the working class whites, that the Democrats don't represent their interests, and that the Republicans will at least defend their interests as white people. Mm-hmm. So that's the situation that we're in, and the Democratic Party left, which really holds the key to breaking out of this bind, is really just added race and racial justice issues as part of a laundry list, and not really integrating it into at the center of their program. So all that we're getting. All right. Well, that's that. I'd be really interested in what your thoughts are on that. Well,
I don't disagree with you, David. I think Tamara says it best when she says they're two sides of the same coin. I've been using worse and worse, and now I've been saying repulsive Republicans and derelict Democrats. But really, I have a funny story. Well, no, and the thing is the sad part is, if those are our choices, we're kind of screwed. We really, really need reform. We really live in a republic. Tamara, you have some data that I sent you in Messenger, It shows the salaries. It shows who these people are. It's exactly what you're saying, David. If they're not the 1%, they are the 9%. And basically, they are taking our life energy and our capital and funding their livelihoods. They are funding their families. They're sending their kids to elite schools. They have massive tax breaks. They're basically creating legislation that works for them. I don't care if someone stands at Walmart saying hello to people who walk in. That is that person's life energy. Tamara, if you look at that data, the numbers on what the folks are paid every year has gone up with inflation. So ironically, they understand inflation because they clearly take care of themselves. Who's not taking care of are the other 90% that are basically funding a political industrial complex because we live in a republic. And we have allowed a few people who are elites, who are completely elite. This experiment is not working. The experiment that people call America, it's not working. And we can amend the Constitution and we can have more than choice A or B. And that's what really needs to happen for the benefit of all of us, because it's getting to a breaking point. I barely slept last night. There were police all over my neighborhood and a circling helicopter everywhere. And it's because people don't have a way to survive. And the Democratic Party is just as guilty. When they state working families, that is veiled language. They are saying that freeloaders who don't work, who may be a predominant hue, don't need to be taken care of. In my opinion, that's what that means. So it's on both sides. I knew a businessman in Atlanta. I still know him. He owned 2 gas stations on corners, and one gas station got into trouble doing something, and there were some local people who were protesting, and they said, don't go to this gas station. We're protesting what happened here. Go to the one across the street. Well, they didn't know he owned both. So in the back rooms, he was laughing. He was like, oh, who cares? It was on the news. It was covered. And that's really the position we're in. Both of our parties are bossed and bought. They're
laughing at us because we're the pawns in their game.
And we're laughing at us. We're choosing between A and B, and we're only happy about B because A looks so bad. So, I applaud what you're doing, Tamara, because it will wake people up no matter what happens right now. And you too, David, no matter what happens. And hopefully, really, again, Warnock has the authority. He has the power right now. He has the leverage. He's being backed by huge money who needs these 2 seats. Whoever, please, if anybody knows Raphael Warnock, please send him this show. We are not enemies. We actually want to make things better. And for those people who may not understand, a Black agenda, when you walk around, the 95% of people who are homeless in Atlanta are Black. Okay, whether it's at Freedom Parkway, whether it's on Metropolitan Parkway, whether it's on 166, they are. And so there is a very reasonable argument right now, given COVID, and people cannot go into shelters. Our hospitals are overrun, to call for a public health crisis because of homelessness. And until we get honest about it, who really caused that crisis? Our local elected officials are Democrats. How did we get here? David, you know the answers to that because we've been talking about it on the show this whole time. So are we supposed to just turn around now? And the scariest part is Biden is publicly saying, I'm in awe of Keisha Lance Bottoms. Do you know what that tells me? Does he even know what's happening in Georgia? Mm-hmm. Do they care except these 2 seats matter now for their own green paychecks?
Mm-hmm. And then Keisha, it's so funny. I kind of felt a little sorry for her because, she did a lot to help Biden get elected. Mm-hmm. And then he turns around and offers her the ambassadorship to the Bermuda, Bahamas, or something.
Don't cry for Keisha.
Barbados. I was like,
he's like, you did good. Go take a vacation on the beach.
With a pat on the head, like, oh my gosh.
Well, do you think that anybody that it's going to be used? I mean, that alone tells you. But the truth of the matter is, during his campaign, Keisha had to call 2 rappers to calm Atlanta down because Buckhead was on fire. Called to, and then put APD and shamed people.
And then you know what the other side of that is, calling these two rappers. What does that say to us Black people? These are our leaders. We got to go get the rappers, the entertainers, people that make us sing and dance. You know, we sing and dance, shucking and jiving.
Well, and ironically, one of them, Killer Mike, you know, who stated, as you said, Tamara, on the show, I don't want to be here. He's a Bernie supporter. He doesn't even support Biden. So where is the logic in any of there's no rhyme or reason. And for people, he's just funny. For people who and that did not work. Yeah. And it's not working. We are being cruel beyond cruel. It's a health crisis. We have rocks under our bridges right now to stop the homeless from being there, when it was the very city funding and federal funding. We literally are funding a political industrial complex on our backs. I pay 40% in taxes. I don't even have children. What am I paying for? The other day I went down Northside Drive. It's on my Facebook. I'm blocked now till Monday. I saw a homeless, a park full of homeless people. And on the other side, I saw the Russell Center for Innovation, federally funded, literally on the cover, putting people to work, totally empty. Homeless people on one side are federal funds, putting people to work, totally empty. We go literally a block up. They are a new low. We go a block up, you see Mercedes-Benz, no benefits agreement, done under Reed, done under Bottoms. Reed basically got Bottoms in office. Go up another block, new construction, luxury apartments. We're funding this. We are doing this to people. So
David, so withhold the vote, David.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I still, you know, have, I have, you know, total agreement with, you know, with this diagnosis. I'm just not sure about that withhold the vote as
It's called being a scab, David. Let's talk about it in the terms of labor. When you have people that are towing the line and saying, you know, we want something, we're demanding something
for everybody.
For everybody that will benefit everybody, that will turn this economy around. Black people are on the bottom, and we're at the pit. We're in the union because you're a union man. You get this when them scabs cross the line.
Yeah, that's a very telling point. I mean, who are the scabs here? You know,
who are the scabs?
Yeah, it's the.
And we have a demand, David.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about solidarity all the time and allies. And now when people can actually stand in solidarity and be allies or accomplices, whatever you want to call them, I'm hesitant to say accomplices because it sounds like a criminal activity. That being said, I understand where you're coming from. Where are they now? I mean, so many people have knocked on my door telling me, literally, their words were, we're going for marginal progress. And all of these people have homes and are gainfully employed. They're bringing people in from other states to knock on my door. Minnesota, I don't know where else. They're not even local. And when I said, why didn't you hire local? Apparently you have a good economy. There's no one, they can't hire here. That's what I was told. It's on camera. It's on camera.
I say, shut up.
No, I let him talk. I let him because I want people to see this. I'm like, you know, don't take my word for it. But, you know, here, look at it. Listen to it. Hear it from this man who's telling you directly. It's on video. So,
David, this is something for you to think about. And anybody that's watching this broadcast, you know, we have put a clear demand on Raphael Warnock. Very clear.
And on the Democratic Party.
And on the Democratic Party. Either you give us something in exchange for this vote, close the racial wealth gap, be intentional about our needs. We carry this party. Give us something, or we will withhold our vote. That's power and that's leverage. And until we get to a point, David, where we can stand in solidarity, there's your word.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens when true justice occurs in court. You make someone whole. There's a harm and you make someone whole. And I mean, Atlanta is the perfect place to do it because of our demographics. It's very baffling. Here's the thing. When people say we're all in the same boat, that's not really true. It reminds me of and it's not reasonable. It reminds me of Martin Luther King and the white progressive. You know, you're basically, you're okay. You have a home, you have a job, and you're going to let the bottom rung take the brunt and that's, I don't see that as solidarity. And the crazy part is that it's almost as if these people don't understand the basic laws of the universe, you know, cause and effect and reciprocity. What do you really think is going to happen when you sacrifice those bottom rungs? Do you really think it's not going to show up in some form? Are you really surprised that you're going to get gas and you get carjacked or assaulted, or something stolen out of your home, or, you know, your car gets? Are you really surprised after what you're partaking in? You're okay to co-sign this? See, that's why I will not co-sign that.
Yeah.
So
but David, you have to think about this, and we're gonna stay on you and stay on you, because you understand this. We need you to stand in solidarity.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's been a one-way street, you know, and there really has to be you know, a reckoning. There has to be a reckoning with these the ways in which sacrifices, you know, where people have been sacrificed. I mean, Robbie is absolutely right that that we are in the same boat. I mean, it's like a double you know, a double misunderstanding or message, because we actually are all in the same boat, and that it's not simply a question of a threat of crime, or, you know, or anything like that. It's the whole nature of the society. Inequality is damaging to those who are seemingly benefiting. So, you know, it's not just a question our house is going to get broken into. It's that, you know, it's that the whole educational base of the society is undermined. Health is undermined, not just for the people who are poor, but also for, you know, for the, you know, middle strata, or whatever you want to call it. They're not benefiting. They're when you look at the hidden costs of all of these you know, of these inequalities, they're really not benefiting. And you know, there's a certain amount of the Democrats, you know, are I don't know, they're more two-faced, they're more conflicted. It's not simply that they're hypocritical; it's that there's this deep conflict within, you know, between protecting the status of, you know, the upper middle class, and doing something that's actually going to be transformative. It's
So
going
what
to
do we do,
involve
David?
increasing risk.
What do we do, David?
Well,
something radical.
yeah.
We withhold the vote.
Yeah. Well, I
That's
wish
all we have. That's the only power we have with this Democratic Party. We have to show them. We have to show them, David, that you cannot take us for granted.
And we need people to back us, to really stand in solidarity. Because when the time comes for you or whoever, you're going to need people to back you. And you cannot expect support when you don't support people. Yeah. This is a reciprocity. It's not a one-way situation.
Absolutely.
Because
it's long overdue to hold off voting. Party loyalty is foolish if the party has no loyalty to the people.
Yeah.
And yes, I want to say, Cheryl, thank you. I meant to say white, moderate. You're absolutely right. And I am disappointed in the white moderates, the modern day 2020 white moderates showing up at my front door telling me, well, we're going to go for marginal change while people die on the streets of Atlanta. And today they're not only white. To your point, David, that 1 to 9%, there's some U's in there, not a lot of them, but they're in there, and they have become gatekeepers. And that's what our elected officials are. They're nothing more.
Gatekeepers. Say
They
it. And
are.
you're gonna elect Raphael is another gatekeeper. No, no.
And he
no.
doesn't have to be.
He
He can
does not
choose
have to be.
not to be. We can have a real leader. No one's going to stop him. In fact, that would make some type of honesty out of the Democratic Party right now, given what's happening here. So it's really their call. It's really their call from now to January 5th. Somebody tag Raphael Warnock. I can't tag him. He doesn't let me. And I'm in Facebook jail now. So
our guest is here. We have a guest from the United States Senate race, Mr. Alan Buckley. Mr. Alan Buckley, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tamara.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to run alongside you. I thought it was a lot of great candidates in this race with a lot of different ideas. A lot of different ideas. You want to tell us more about yourself?
Well, I'm an attorney, CPA, and so I deal with a lot of the tax system and finances and retirement plans and stuff like that. And I've always been. I got involved in politics with the Libertarian Party back in 2003 when we invaded Iraq, and it kind of sent me off the deep end. It really bothered me because I thought it was a fraud and it was going to make our terrorism problems worse and our financial problems worse, which no one really seemed to focus on. And so originally the Democrats were looking for a candidate, and I wrote a letter to the head of the party and never received a response. And then I saw Roy Barnes at a restaurant and talked to him briefly. And then my secretary suggested I write him a letter and see if they would be interested, because they didn't have a candidate. This was in 2003. And so I wrote Roy a letter, and he wrote me back a nice letter. And he said, I'm going to have the party get a hold of you. Well, they never got a hold of me. I never heard from them. So I ended up calling the Secretary of State's office in 2003 and asking if I could run for U.S. Senate on my own. And they said, well, no, you need to get 33,000 votes on a signed petition. And I said, well, that's not possible. They said, well, you could be the Libertarian Party's candidate, and they're on the ballot. And I just said, I don't know much about them. But they gave me the number of the head of the party, and I called the guy. He picked up the phone and talked to me for like half an hour. So it was like night and day from the Democrats. And so I ended up eventually running in 2004 against Johnny Isaacson and Denise Majette, and got about a little over 2% of the vote. Ran again in 2008, got between 3 and 4%. And then ran again in 2016, got between 4 and 5% as a Libertarian all the way. And then I dropped out of the party, though, this last year because I basically think there's too many dart throwers in the Libertarian Party who point out problems, but then don't propose solutions to the problems. And that's where I have a real problem. My belief is if you think there are problems with the system, you need to propose solutions. And one of the problems I have with the current candidates, all four of them in the U.S. Senate race, they don't have any solutions to the major problems. And the media never even questions them on, what are the problems and what are your solutions? And I want to say one thing about the AJC, and I sent Andre Jackson, who's I think he's the main editor of the AJC, an email to this effect after our jungle primary. I said, your newspaper picked out 5 candidates in this race who were in this jungle primary, who were the only candidates in your mind. That they were, Collins and Loeffler on the Republican, and on the Democrat, it was, Warnock and Lieberman and Ed Tarver. Mm-hmm. Well, and they just pushed those 5 candidates the whole race, and the rest of us didn't get any coverage at all. And lo and behold, Deborah Jackson, who got no coverage, got more than double the combined votes of Lieberman and Tarver. And so I said to Mr. Jackson, and I wrote a letter to the editor to the AJC about that they didn't publish, basically saying, why are you doing this? Why are you picking certain people that you want to be the people that are only considered? And so who's behind the scenes making these calls? That's what I'd really like to know. And I'd really like for, the public to start questioning why these things are being done, because they clearly had an agenda and they were focused on these 5 people. So, but in any event, what I'd like to say is my candidacy focused on some issues that most people don't think about. And one of the major problems is the national debt. And the vast majority of the population doesn't think about it, doesn't care about it. But it is the potentially largest long-term problem the country faces, because in 2007, when the total national debt was under $9 trillion, the Government Accountability Office, that's the nation's audit arm, said our nation's debts are going to spiral out of control. So that was 13 years ago. Now the debts are 3 times that amount. They're 27 trillion. Well, a lot of people say, well, what's 27 trillion? But that doesn't mean anything to me. Well, to give you a reference point, the most revenue we've ever raised in a year was 2019. That was 3.5 trillion. So, and we spent 4.5 trillion. So we ran $1 trillion deficit in a year of great prosperity. So that's the problem I have with the Republicans is both the major parties are destroying the country financially. Let me say that. The main problem I have with the Republicans is they say we're not as bad as the Democrats, when in reality they're awful. They're both awful. And so, last year we had a 50-year low in unemployment, and we ran $1 trillion deficit. If we weren't going to balance the budget last year, and this year we ran a $3.1 trillion deficit. So we're just adding to this huge debt number. So I'd like to point out, a lot of people think, well, how does that impact me now? Well, what happens is, because the debt is so high, the Federal Reserve has to set its rate really low, because Treasury rates follow the Fed rate. So, and the Fed has said it's going to keep its rate at 0% for the next 3 years. Meanwhile, it's printing money like crazy, okay? And throughout this pandemic, it printed money basically at a rate that the government borrowed money. So what's happening is the government's borrowing like crazy beyond our reasonable means to ever pay it back. And we're printing a lot of money that won't lead to inflation now, but we'll probably see big inflation in the next few years, because you can't just keep growing the money supply and not have negative implications. Some other ways it's already impacting us that people don't realize. You hear about all these home prices going through the roof. Well, that's because mortgage rates followed the Fed rates as well. When the Fed rate goes down, the Treasury rates go down, and they want to keep the Treasury rates down, because if too high of an interest expense of our tax revenue goes to interest, you're going to have a revolution. You think Black Lives Matter is revolutionary? Imagine if we had a more traditional 5% interest rate on our national debt. That's more of an average 10-year Treasury rate over the last, going back to the 1800s, 1830s, I think it is. If you take 5% of 27 trillion, okay, well, the public debt is more like 21 trillion, but you get basically about 1.1 trillion of interest expense we'd have to pay on our revenue this year was 3.4 trillion. So a third of our tax revenue would have to go to pay to interest if we got back to ordinary interest rates. So we can't do that. So what's happened is now you have these super low mortgage rates that have caused the prices of residential real estate to go through the roof. So what's happened is a lot of these people are making a lot of money on their homes, but if they want to buy a new one, then they got to pay a huge amount for it as well. So meanwhile, through this pandemic, a lot of people are fixing up their homes. So if you go to Home Depot, like I know a guy who works at Home Depot, and he said the price of all their building materials is through the roof. And so they've jacked it all up because there's so much demand because people are fixing up their homes. Well, when that subsides, you're going to see you're already seeing a lot of homes being built. So you're going to see more and more, so whenever demand exceeds supply, you see supply increase whenever it can increase. So you're going to see a lot more homes built. And then if mortgage rates go back up, and they eventually will, because when a debtor takes on too much debt, eventually the game is called, and someone's going to demand more security or higher interest rates. And when mortgage rates go up and you've got a glut of homes, you're going to see a reversal in these, massive home price increases. And
Let's let Robbie
Go
jump in. Robbie,
Go
jump
ahead.
in, because I know this is your wheelhouse.
I do. I want to ask Mr. Well, I know what he's saying. He's saying that we're going to have another bubble, a housing cycle bubble, and that the consequences of that will be devastating. It's already starting. The REOs are starting to call agents in. I get notifications all the time, real estate owned properties, etc. But Mr. Buckley, just for layman's terms, because you're a CPA, super helpful, a certified public accountant. If a household, a regular household, behaved this way, we're basically using credit in the way that you're describing, exceeding their means, and in a way, when you say printing money, it's kind of equivalent to credit card debt, perhaps. What would happen to that household?
Well, they'd have to file bankruptcy, and that's what would happen.
Right.
And
so with our government, when our government operates the way that a household who would eventually have to file bankruptcy due to exceedingly large debt that they cannot pay back, what happens when our government is in this position? Who foots that bill?
Well, that's a great question. And let me say this, the only time we had a debt as high as this as a percentage of the GDP, the size of the economy, was right after World War II. And how do we get rid of that debt? So that's the only way you can go back and say, well, what do we do there? Well, there were three things that we had going for us back then, or actually four. First of all, the U.S. dominated the world economy. The rest of the world was completely wiped out from World War II. Europe, Japan, Russia was a communist system. We didn't have any competition from China, so we dominated the world. So what happened was the U.S. had real economic growth between 1950 and 1955, and 1961 and 1968. We averaged over 5% real growth because we dominated the world. Now, that's not going to happen in the future because we don't dominate the world economically. We're not going to. And the CBO projects 2% growth on average over the next decade, okay? So that's not a way out of it. The next way was we had much higher taxes on the wealthy. The highest tax rate in 1944 was 94%. In 1953, it was 91%. Now the highest tax rate on the wealthy is 37%. So we're not going to get it from revenue, and Joe Biden's going to take it to 39.6. So that's not going to do squat for the problem. And the other thing we did was we had a lot of inflation. Now, I'm 60 years old, so a lot of you all are younger than me, I assume. And maybe not the guy in the corner, I don't know. But from 68 to 82, we averaged 7.4% inflation per year. Now, in the last several years, we've seen 1%, 2%, and really, I think the goal should be to have 0% inflation. I understand why we don't mind a little bit of it, but so if you look back to what we did after World War II, we're not going to have the growth. We're not going to have the huge taxes. We're not going to dominate the world. What does that leave? Inflation. So the only way that we're going to get out of this is through inflation. And so if you are an ordinary Joe, okay, let me give you a real life example. My father and stepmother. My father's 87, and he was a genius in a certain way. He was very smart at engineering. He has a PhD in this field called tribology, which is friction and wear, dealing with airplane, engines, and what's the right metal to put in an airplane engine, and what's the right lubricant to, what's the right oil to keep it from wearing down. But he knows nothing about investments, nothing. And he was also a lawyer too, and on the side, he was a workaholic, and he retired when he was 56 because he was shot. But he made enough money. He worked for NASA for a number of years. So he's always been a middle class guy. But the only investments he's ever owned, except for one short period of time, he's owned CDs and Treasury bills. Okay. Well, Treasury notes are now paying a 10-year note pays less than 1%. And if you read the Wall Street Journal, there's all sorts of articles saying the 10-year outlook for inflation is more like 2 to 3%. So if you own those things and you hold them to maturity, you're going to lose. So my father and stepmother now have all these CDs, and they pay less than 1%. I said, look, you got to get out of those investments, and they're too old to do it. They don't understand the stock market. They don't understand investment, so they're just going to lose money as they age. They're not, because their buying power is going to diminish. They're too old to learn a new trick. I tried to induce my father to buy some stocks one time. He put $5,000 into a mutual fund. It went down, and he got out. Never again, he said. But early this year, I said, when oil and gas got down to historic low, I said, just buy some, and it'll go up, and it'll help you get more than 1% in your CDs, because if you can get 20% in the oil market for 20% of your portfolio, you'll average 3 or 4%, even if you get 1% in your CD. So my point is, a lot of ordinary people are going to get crushed because they don't have great stock market advisors to investment advisors to protect them through this. And the wealthy are going to be able to protect themselves better than the ordinary people. And I do a little. Go ahead.
Mr. Buckley, if ordinary people, you're predicting that ordinary people, due to our current situation and inflation occurring and us not being able to basically be an imperialist country, which we've been in the past, what's going to happen?
Quasi-empire.
Yeah, what's going to happen to people who are not even ordinary, who are on poverty level?
Well, I mean, for them, it's hard to say. I would imagine their situation won't change dramatically, but
Even
a lot
with
of
COVID?
what?
Even with COVID impact?
Well, right now they're negatively impacted by COVID. And just so you know, I came up with a solution to provide a second major COVID bill. We do need to spend more money on COVID now to help, people who are hurting. I had a woman call me about a month ago, and she was from somewhere in North Cartersville. And she was a woman who was divorced, had 2 kids. And what happened was her kids, she said she was 40 years old, and she was almost crying on the phone. She said she had to quit she got furloughed from her job. Okay, so she wasn't fired, she was furloughed, and she had a sales job. And then her kids' school closed, so she had to stay home to take care of her kids. Well, she didn't get any CARES Act benefits because she wasn't entitled to unemployment because she wasn't fired. She quit. Well, she quit because she had to take care of her kids. So I wrote a letter to Kelly Loeffler saying, why don't you do something about this? This is a typical example of someone who's fallen through the cracks. And, never got a response. I think most of these politicians couldn't care less about the average person's predicament. They're there for power. And, all these people who are running, except for David Perdue, and I don't like David Perdue. I will not vote for David Perdue no matter what, because I think he's a hypocrite. He ran in 2014 on solving these financial problems. He's done nothing since he got up there except make them worse. So anyways, but on my website, buckleyforsenate.org, if anybody wants to take a look, although I'm no longer running, I do have solutions to all these major problems. But let me tell you this, they involve sacrifice. There is no easy way out of this. No way, no how. Reasonable sacrifice. But the longer we wait, the bigger the pain is going to be. This is, if you look back through our history, go ahead.
Just two questions.
We're gonna make sure we keep it real short, Robbie, because I want us to take some time and read some of the comments that are coming in. So Alan, give you like another minute or so. Sure. Go ahead and ask one more question, Robbie.
Before you leave, I definitely want to hear your position on reparations from an economic standpoint. And I do appreciate your just blunt, like poor people, they're in the situation, not much is going to happen for them, because David and I kind of go back and forth a bit on this. And I think that the Democrats tend to point fingers at Republicans just to keep their own power base. And Republicans, obviously the majority of them are rich. That being said, I want you to speak on the reparations component. And then if you could, your position, I'm curious. And then separately, housing. Do you believe housing is a human right?
Well, as far as reparations, I'm against them. As I just said, we're broke. And from all that I've read, it would cost a huge amount of money. And, where are you going to draw the line? Are you going to say that the ancestors of Union soldiers who died in the war, or, who lost arms and legs, do they get money too? I mean, where do you draw the line? What's worse, being a slave or being killed? And a lot of those guys did fight for, some of them fought for the Union, and a lot of them fought because slavery was bad. It was pure evil. Is housing a human right? No. let me just say this. A lot of people want to say, oh, healthcare is a human right. Well, if healthcare is a human right, let me give you an example. My mother, who is 86, born in 1934, she went like 20 to 30 years without ever seeing a doctor between when she was in her 50s to in her 80s. And I took her to a doctor in her 80s because she had a medical problem. And the question was, when was the last time she saw a doctor? And I said, I don't remember, because she just never went. Some people don't really have significant health care needs, and others do. You have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we need a system that allows everybody to be able to take advantage of that. Don't get me wrong, we have huge disparities in wealth that are a problem. But let me say this, if you look at my website, I have all sorts of materials on there. One of the problems we have with poor people is we encourage single parenthood, okay? And I have a press release that I put on there where I give an example of, I have a couple, and they have a kid. And then I have how do they come out if they're single versus if they're married? And they come out much better if they're single, because they get more tax benefits and more entitlements. We incentivize single parenthood. And the last I checked, in the Black population, it was 70% single parenthood. In the white, it was in the 40s. So that's a huge problem. We've got to return to the family unit, and we've got to strengthen that. And all of our federal policies should encourage marriage and discourage single parenthood. I know there's a lot of people who get into a single parenthood situation, and it's not their fault. But that's one thing. That's different from.
You think?
So Alan, I want to thank you for joining us on this broadcast. We ran us. Go ahead, Dave. You want to give something before he heads out?
Robbie has said that we need to treat the federal government and its debt the way we do with an individual household. I think that's really been challenged, at least very, very heavily, by a lot of people, that are new monetary theory, for instance, which talks about debt in an entirely different way. I mean, don't you see federal debt is an investment, and that's the way and yes, and reparations are actually an investment. So, when you say these things about inflation is the only way to resolve the issue of debt, I wonder what you think is being done with the money. The problem that we have is not that we have a debt; it's that most of the debt is in the hands of the finance, insurance, and real estate industry. They are the ones who are getting paid off. And the rest of us are, yes, we are faced with potential housing bubble. When we had the last bubble, which blew up in everybody's face, hedge funds began to take over thousands of single family homes, and they still now run the real estate market. There are hedge funds that own thousands and thousands of single family homes now that used to be in the hands of families and individuals. And you don't address that at all, it seems to me.
You know something? Let me say this. Look at my website, buckleyforsenate.org. Yeah. I address all this stuff. The debt is going to grow out of control, okay? And printing money is what's taking place now, because you don't have these other options that existed in the past. That's going to kill. I gave you my father and stepmother as a real life example. Those are middle class people who are going to get hurt, okay? And the wealthy people are going to be able to figure this out a lot better than other people because they're ahead of the game, and they pay people to figure this stuff out. And we're going to have wider disparities in our wealth gap. So if you're saying the debt isn't a problem, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. It's a huge problem. It's the biggest long-term problem our country faces.
That is
not an investment. It's excessive. It's excessive. A reasonable amount of debt is okay. It's crazy what we got now.
Yeah, the debt that is owed right now is not an investment. The debt that is owed right now is a debt to big banks and to hedge funds. They are the ones who are not paying. They're not paying. You pointed out yourself. We need a 95%, top marginal tax rate. We need to claw back that money from the finance, insurance, and real estate industry, who, by the way, are blocking things like Medicare for all. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office just ran the numbers. A Medicare for all system does not put the country into debt. It actually produces, savings. So
Well,
you're looking at this as if debt is a monolith, and it's not. And what the federal government does with the money is crucially important. If they put $1 trillion into infrastructure, that's very different from putting $1 trillion into the hands of the financial elite.
I don't think you heard a lot of what I said, and I suggest you look at my website since we're running out of time. But I explained it all, and it's the largest long-term problem we've got, and it's going to potentially bring down the country.
More than climate change, more than racial inequality.
Let me say this. Climate change is a major problem, but it's a very gradual problem, and the debt is going to blow up a lot earlier than the climate's going to blow up.
Well, the climate is already blowing up, and it's
a very gradual demise.
Every day,
it's a gradual demise.
We are spending billions and billions of dollars on remediation at this point, just on the basis of catastrophes that have happened. You talk about mounting debt. That is a debt. The climate debt is something that, and every year that we wait puts trillions and trillions of dollars more into the potential, into the need for remediation. So
there are ways
talking about the debt. It's
all
financial. What happens if the
look at my website. I have solutions to deal with the climate change.
Thank you for joining us, Alan.
You're welcome.
Candidate for the United States, and I actually saw your signs around, so I knew you out there running hard. So
I put up a lot of them myself, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I actually saw them. I actually saw your signs around. I think you know what, and there may be one still up somewhere, because for some reason I want to say I saw it like very recent, like still out there.
Good. Hope it hangs on.
Thank you for joining us on this broadcast, Alan.
Okay. Take care, Tamara.
Have a great one.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. David?
David. I said you single family. I heard that. I
know it was. I know it was a lot.
It's there's a certain amount of.
There was somebody in this race for everybody. There was somebody in this race for everybody. That's the one thing I can appreciate about this race to the United States Senate.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, David. These people who talk about debt and they mean financial debt, and don't realize that we've incurred this climate, this ecological debt. If the sea levels rise by even 5 feet, which they are, they were to be expected to do in the next, decade. How much devastation, how many trillions and trillions of dollars of damage that's going to cost. It's just silly. It makes no sense. You can't address the ecological disaster as if it's part of anyway. And it's. We're at 11:59. But the connection between the climate crisis and the crisis of white supremacy is absolutely integrated with one another. The reason that the United States has 2.5 times the greenhouse gas emissions per capita has to do with suburbanization and the ways in which the country's housing and everything else has been created as a white privilege. And so we have this car culture that there's no other advanced country in the world that has this amount of about this amount of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's because of our lifestyle. Primarily has to do with agriculture and pushing agriculture out of connections with the cities, so that it's all done by highly petroleum based monoculture on these huge gigantic corporate farms. I mean, all of this stuff puts the United States in a position. Talk about reparations. I mean, this country owes not just ADOS, but the whole world reparations for what it's been, the impact of big oil on the. Okay,
we're at the top of the hour, David.
Yeah.
Calm down.
I apologize for this. I don't know why I'm getting so bent down.
The audience loves it, David. They know you're a warrior. Actually, a lady sent me a prayer for you, and she said in her prayer that she didn't know how long you would be around, David, but she just prayed your strength, and she prayed that you continue to fight the way you fight. And I thought that was beautiful. I don't know. I have to share the whole thing with you, but people, thank you for staying in the fight. Thank you, Robbie, for being in this fight. And what we're speaking truth to power. We're speaking truth to power. And I just, I know we're doing the right thing, whether people understand it now or not. Robbie, you're muted. Wait. Unmute yourself.
Sorry. I think it's fascinating. The gentleman has a background, in economics, but doesn't recognize the need for reparations and doesn't see housing as a vital component, to being productive.
Yeah.
So he acknowledges both parties, are a problem and selfish and et cetera. And he certainly has education, an education background. And I understand what he's saying regarding the debt. I do. My point is, our elected officials operate in such a way that could be deemed to someone as a person or a household as reckless and irresponsible, yet we don't provide productive means for people to actually access a better quality of life. In fact, all they're doing is, funding their own pockets out of our life energy. So if that's what we want to continue, while, as you said, David, impacting the environment. But the difference between Republicans and Democrats, I'm not sure. They've flipped in their own histories, and if you look at their salaries right now, 170 plus, they're all 1%ers or 9%ers. And literally, we're funding it. Yeah. And all the money you're talking about, there's very little oversight. So that's probably what he's describing. There's no oversight when this money goes somewhere. So what are we spending our life energy on?
Yeah. Well, Robbie, absolutely right. I mean, the oversight issue has been, 50 or 60 years of Pentagon spending. I mean, when you think about that and the amount of the lack of oversight of $750 billion, that's going into it. And all of it is to do things like prop up the oil companies. You have a Navy that is essentially there to protect the Gulf oil tankers, and so we and $4 or $5 trillion to spend on the Gulf War. I mean, all of these things, you're absolutely right, Robbie. And then the debt could be solved.
I agree with you, the debt could be solved, but we no longer have, he's right in the sense that we no longer have the means as a country, the industrial capital, or, the examples he described. And in Latin America, it's called bancarrota, it's bankrupt. When the banks go upside down and people's money is just liquidated from accounts, okay, it's happened to family members in my own country. When they say the quote unquote guerrillas came down from the mountains and started kidnapping people and sending body parts, that's how serious it got, because they couldn't take over or start a war and manufacture, funds.
I
So
thought you were from Puerto Rico.
Okay, guys, we're at the top of the hour.
I'm half.
We're beyond the top of the hour. I want to thank you. You can find Ms. Robbie Caban at robbiecaban.com. You can find Mr. David Slavin right here on Facebook at Acknowledge the Divide. And you can find me, Tamara Johnson Sheely, at tamarasheely.com. Every week, we give voice to issues, activists, and activism right here in the great state of Georgia. We have more candidates to come. We're going to ride this train until January the 5th.
Well, we should come revisit this issue about the debt. I mean, I think Robbie's got some really good thoughts about
We'll
it.
be back next week, David. Same time, same channel. Have a great week, everybody.
Solidarity forever means privileges never.